Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is the Paddock Podcast. My name is Joe. That's Jay Marty doing some big tweets. How are you, Jay?
I'm good, sorry. I'm just arguing with people. I'm arguing, right? I'll tell you what I was doing there.
Arguing.
I was arguing with people on Twitter who were Ten Hag out, and I will continue to argue with people on Twitter who were Ten Hag out.
We're going to be talking about that, the future of
He's going to get Elon's. He's getting Elon's money in it.
We're also going to be looking at the cup final. Ronaldo, you were here for the watch along.
Yes.
What an absolutely fantastic day that was.
It was amazing. It was amazing. I honestly, I had that little bit of naive confidence going into it, thinking it's a one-off game, it's a derby, could we pull it off? But I didn't genuinely believe that we could. And then literally when we went 2-0 up, I don't think if people actually watched the watch along and see what I was like, I was so nervous.
Yeah.
I think I was more nervous when we were 2-0 than when we was 1-0 up, because it felt like, oh shit, we can actually win this now.
Yeah.
But I thought, to a man, United, Ten Hag and his tactics, every single player did their job, and I thought it was unbelievable. Like, that was one of those days where I couldn't be any prouder to be a United fan.
Yeah. And there haven't been many of them this season, really, has there?
I
think we're going to go through some of the tactics, the way that Ten Hag deployed his team, the personnel, and how maybe this will or won't affect his future. There's been sort of weird back and forths with different journalists saying things and then redacting things or clarifying things throughout the day. So we'll go into that. As well, obviously the latest on Erik Ten Hag, but just starting on that final and get your thoughts in the comments, because this is the first time we've been live since that game. Ronaldo, you were here on the watch line. We were at the game. Obviously some things are better when you're there. Some things are better to watch on TV in terms of what you see. You can be clouded and you can be focused on different things. What did it look like on TV? Because to me, being there, it felt as though City had loads of the ball, obviously, but you know, is the equivalent of a boxer throwing a load of jabs, throwing a load of feints, none of them landing, and then the opposition hitting them with a big left hand. Like, to me, they had the ball, but United tactically looked far more dangerous. That first half in particular, I think we won the game in that first half, and I feel like United outclassed City in that half.
I fully believe that, because sometimes you can look at it as a team that's meant to be superior. Man City is they just had an off day, but I generally think it was United, the players, the tactics, the structure that threw City off. I think that we deserve as much credit as we deserve the credit for making Man City uncomfortable rather than them having an off day. And from a structural standpoint, every player looked like they knew their jobs. Everyone looked like they were together. It wasn't just like we sat deep and we were solid and we were pragmatic, which I was calling for us to do. We also picked our moments in jumping to press and being aggressive in a tackle, being aggressive in the duels. There weren't any gaps, there weren't any spaces. It was just a compact, well-drilled performance from start to finish, and I think we would deserve winners. And from a game plan standpoint, I've said it time and time again since yesterday. Or was it 2 days ago? It almost feels like yesterday now.
It feels like
that
it's just
literally
finished.
Ten Hag just nailed that.
Yeah.
Completely nailed it. Obviously, having Martinez and Varane back was huge.
Yeah.
You could see what the actual people have been arguing about, how the differing centre-half in partnerships and how much that's hampered us. I think seeing yesterday Martinez, the performance that he put in, how much he helps us on the ball, his character, his energy, and what he brings in terms of how he almost resonates with the rest of the team.
Yeah,
I think people follow his lead.
I think that's a massive thing. And we'll get back into this sort of specific tactics on the pitch, what we do with the ball, what we do out of possession in a second. But I think a massive thing that people underestimate with Martinez, and you might get a bit of this when he's in the training ground and not playing because he's injured or whatever, but he's the one straight to the manager at full time. He's the one taking other players out onto the pitch, show them the trophy. He's the one doing the post-match interviews that everyone's retweeting, rallying behind. He makes this team, from the fans' perspective and from the players' perspective, so much more likeable. He is a confidence, he is an energy, an aggression in that dressing room that we don't have. I think Bruno Fernandes sometimes this season has looked by himself in terms of energy, hard work, effort, likeability for Man United. Martinez brings that in absolute spades. Do you think that's an underrated part of him? Not even what he does with the ball or without the ball, but who he is as a person. That's a massive part of him, isn't it?
100%. Like, he's such a leader, rather not just on the pitch but off the pitch as well. You can see he's got a little bit of everything about him as a leader. You see him going over to Marcus Rashford and sort of putting an arm around him and saying, well done, man.
Yeah.
Like, enjoy this and sort of gene him up a little bit, because Marcus was emotional after everything that's gone on this season. I get it. You see him picking up the manager. You see him squaring up to Kyle Walker. Let's have it. He's got a little bit of everything. He has. He's one of those players that you would love him on your team. You'd love him in your dressing room, and you'd hate him if you were against him. You'd hate him because he's minute at his job, for starters. When he's fully fit, he is an absolutely outstanding centre-back. He is. He's great on the ball. He's great at timing his tackles. He's even in the air, he's only 5'9". He seems to be able to handle that.
His position is excellent,
Position is superb.
Yeah.
He's a 10 out of 10 defender. When it comes to his leadership qualities, I've already mentioned all them as well. And he's the sort of guy you can take in a battle with you. Got a nickname for the Butcher for a reason. And if you're a manager, you'd be like, God, get him back in my squad, where I'm missing him so much, because he's that type of character that we do need at United, and any club would miss him. So, yeah, it's not a coincidence. Like, these things aren't a coincidence with Lisandro Martinez. It's not a coincidence that he's come back into that team and we've beat Manchester City when we've struggled against them twice this season already. Yeah. It's not a coincidence that since he's been at the club, we've won 2 trophies in 2 years and he's played his part in both those trophies. It's not. No. He's a big part of that. And it's just... It's a shame, man. It is, of all the people to get injured, like, I know you can't choose, but he's probably the last one Erik Ten Hag would have had out for this season, or one of the last ones. And ultimately, I think that's going to end up costing Erik Ten Hag his job. Yeah. I think the fact that we didn't have Lisandro Martinez, even when he came back for the Wolves game, was it the Wolves game? And then he got injured against West Ham. Yeah, I even think then, had he not got injured against West Ham, had he stayed fit in the season, Martinez, Ten Hag might have had enough. Because it probably to keep his job. It might well have been.
It might well have been a 5th place finish if that had happened.
5th in the FA Cup.
In the end,
it's different, isn't it?
Completely crumbled. They were there for the taking if we weren't so bad between kind of February and the start of May, or maybe March and the start of May. Just back to the tactics of the game. Midfield, I predicted it. He does it against Man City, doesn't he? Where he often will play 4 centre mids with Bruno kind of playing a cross between a false 9, and he'll drift out wide as well. But it was McTominay, Amrabat, Mainu and Bruno all playing. He likes to sort of pack that midfield out against City. McTominay was sort of walking alongside Rodri for large parts of the game. Did you like what he did there in terms of stopping them building up a head of steam?
Yeah, because one thing that we complained about was the fact that you saw like these contradicting philosophies in where we were pressing high, but then the back 4 was sitting deeper. Yeah. But there wasn't any of that. It wasn't even just we sat in a low block. There were periods where we were almost in a mid-block almost, and we were picking our moments to be aggressive and jump out and press, as I said earlier. And to me, it looked like a unified team where everyone just knew what they were doing and all the jobs kind of just combined perfectly. And that's something that we didn't see enough of this season. And it almost seems like the injury excuse does have credence, because you saw the difference that Martinez and Varane playing together, starting together made, but then you also see what a team can look like when it's not disjointed and you've got the right players playing week in, week out, and then you've got more available to you. And I got more confidence in Ten Hag on Saturday, because it wasn't even just the tactics that he deployed, but it was how he was almost like in terms of his aura and his energy about him. He almost had a little bit of a bravado that I quite liked. He looked like a man that's been there before.
If we'd won a few more games this season, I think we'd have seen that a lot more. I think it's hard to... Like, people always say, why aren't he having a go at the players? What's he doing in training? Why isn't he screaming at them in the dressing room and all? But, like, if you lost, 14 games or whatever we lost this season, if you just go ballistic and scream at your players for every time we lose, eventually it just breaks down. You can't only just go... all he does every time we lose is go absolutely mental. Like, sometimes you have to do different things, and sometimes you have to pretend things are a little bit better than they are. You can't just, give them a dressing down every time, because people hate you. Like, do you know what I mean? We've been so bad this season that if he'd have just gone absolutely ballistic after every game, absolute rocket up the arse every time, you're doing that every week.
And it's the way the players seem to look like they really bought into him. And that you can't watch that game against City and think that's a group of players that are giving up on the gaffer.
No.
Look like the opposite. Look like the opposite, and after the game as well, it looked like that family orientated vibe. Yeah. That football teams do need, because that morale and that type of intangible can actually be that 1%, 2% difference.
That's one of the things that I think the best manager I've ever seen at cultivating that feeling is Jose Mourinho. In terms of in short bursts, obviously Sir Alex did it over decades, but going to clubs and we're a team. Us against the world. We're a team. We're locked in. Jose Mourinho's as good as I've ever seen at that. And it makes such a difference, especially in big games where you need a performance out of your big players. Because people always, not that people don't forget, but people like to pretend that it's the manager making every pass, making every run, making every tackle, putting the ball in the back of the net. And if someone misses a 5-yard shot, that's because the manager's tactics were wrong. A lot of what happens in a game is down to those individuals. And you look at performances like Bruno, like Garnacho, Mainu, Amrabat even. Getting that motivation there is a huge thing, but you need them to step up as well. And they did that. I think that was a massive part of the game as well.
I get your point about Jose, but I think, and I know you mentioned Fergie, but I think Fergie did that far more than Jose ever did. And Fergie did it year in, year out, and that's what kept us going, because it'd be like, not just us against them and that siege mentality that Jose had, but look at some of the players that Sir Alex Ferguson got to win titles. And Tom Cleverley, great player, played 30 games in a title-winning season. Yeah. No one else is doing that. I don't even think Pep's doing that with him. Danny Welbeck, I love Danny Welbeck, but again, played 30-odd games in a title-winning season. Anderson won title after title, and then when Fergie leaves, and next thing, Anderson's having oxygen to play football. Like that, those managers can get more out of players because there's they've got that something in them, and the players buying into what they're doing. And I think we're seeing that. And the reason why you get rid of a manager, there's several reasons, right? Not just these reasons, but one, like you're saying, he's lost the dressing room. We saw it a little bit with Wally. We saw it with Jose eventually. Yeah. We saw it with basically every manager that we've had post Sir Alex Ferguson. He hasn't lost the dressing room. You can see the players are still fighting for him. Another reason is there's better options out there. There ain't.
We'll get to that.
I know we're going to get to that in a minute, so I won't dwell on it.
Yeah.
But there ain't. Another option is he's done nothing at his time to justify staying at Manchester United, like David Moyes did nothing while he was manager at Manchester United, where you go, stick with the kid. He has done something. Yeah, he's won 2 fucking trophies in 2 years. And and another thing as well is it is possible for a United manager to learn from his mistakes. It is possible for a United manager to think, I can do this and get away with this, and then actually, no, that's not quite worked out. And if you're just going to get rid of every single manager that makes mistakes, you're never going to get a manager who's going to grow. Fergie finished 13th and won an FA Cup. We didn't get rid of him. Yeah. And people go, well, you can't compare Ten Hag to Fergie. I'm not comparing the same. I was looking at the situation. Fergie was learning and sort of making mistakes and then sort of rectifying those mistakes, and then he got to a stage where it was like the club was moving forward, the team was moving forward, won a trophy, got himself some breathing space, and we carried on, we kicked on. Ten Hag's won a trophy now, and I think he's earned the right to be kept on, especially when I look and he's not lost the dressing room. There's no one else out there that fills me with inspiration, and I think, he's made mistakes, but even on Saturday, you can see he's learned from some of them.
I think that was one of the biggest things, because everyone's seen how critical I've been.
I don't blame you for that as well, by the way.
And certain things, tactically and structurally, that I saw some of the horrendous performances that we've had this season. But I've never kind of been all the way into the whole definitely get rid of him, because of the reason that you've just said. When you look at the replacements, I'm not entirely sure I see the candidates that are being touted as being considerably better or better than Ten Hag, and I think that has to be considered. To me, I looked at the list, and I was like, you do feel a little bit underwhelmed when you go throughout the list that they're looking to replace us with.
Well, just on that, sorry, there's been a bit of news in the last few minutes from David Ornstein, who's tweeted that Kieran McKenna expected to sign new long-term contract with Ipswich Town. 38-year-old Northern Irishman considered by Chelsea, Man United and Brighton, but set to end speculation by committing future to Ipswich Town after securing promotion to the Premier League. So looks like Kieran McKenna's going to not just stay at Ipswich, but extend his contract at Ipswich, which is, obviously big, because he was one of the main candidates United had been linked with. Some of the other options, Pochettino, Tuchel, Thomas Frank, and who's the other one that's been linked a lot? Pochettino, Tuchel, Thomas Frank. There was 5. I can't remember the other one now. Oh, De Zerbi, that's it. I think there's such obvious weaknesses with all of those managers. And, we've got weaknesses in Ten Hag as well, but I don't see, like you said, Ronaldo, any of them standing out to me as someone who I trust to kind of take us to the top level.
It was me. The only other one that I liked, I kind of liked Thiago Motta, and then he went to Juventus, and I was like, after that, I was kind of like, I'm looking at the people that we're linked to, and they don't fill you with that much excitement and confidence. That was my thing. Yeah. And then I've kind of, after the weekend, I've been chatting to people on Twitter quite a lot. I was like, maybe the difference that Varane and Martinez made defensively and aggressively to that squad.
Yeah.
It was definitely a factor in terms of how poor we were defensively with having Casemiro centre half and Evans and Maguire and constantly chopping and changing. And I think Jay made a very good point. If Ten Hag's able to see what his mistakes were, to iron out some of the stubbornness that he might have shown tactically at some points this season, and kind of learn from what he's seen worked and kind of play to the personnel that he does have, I think there's something there. And I think I saw enough on Saturday, because that was one of the few games this season that I looked and thought that every single player was put in a position to succeed. He set them up perfectly and he gave them jobs that suited him. It was a tactical masterclass for me, and I thought if he was ever going to be able to save his job off something, I know you shouldn't judge it straight off an FA Cup final, but he definitely probably planted a little seed in Ineos' head, especially when they're looking at their candidates thinking, what else can they bring that's different from what Ten Hag has? And now that Mckenna, who probably looked like someone that was going to be their first choice, is out of the running, I think that puts the door completely wide open for Ten Hag to possibly stay, unless Ineos favour someone else.
Well, so on that, Jay, though, one way of looking at it, like you said there, Ronaldo, is McKenna's out of the running. We can no longer pick McKenna because he's staying at Ipswich. Another way of potentially looking at it is maybe United have told Kieran McKenna, we aren't, we're not having him, and now he's decided to stay at Ipswich. We don't know which one, we don't know what the truth is there. For you, I know you said maybe, I don't know if it was your first choice, but you were somewhat excited.
You know me, I'm Ten Hag in.
Yeah.
But if we are going to get rid of him, I almost felt like that was like, if you're going to gamble, you may as well gamble on the great unknown. Yeah. I feel like Pochettino ain't going to win you the title. I feel like I know that. I think the chance of Pochettino signing a 4-year deal at United and winning the title within those 4 years is nil. I think it's almost non-existent. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Kieran McKenna, you just don't know. I don't know how good he is. He's done very well at Ipswich, it's different levels. He might come in the Premier League and flop, or he might be that guy. He
had more of an element of the unknown that you're talking about than the likes of, because you've seen more of De Zerbi, you've seen what Tuchel's like, you've seen what Pochettino's like. Us as fans, we seem to know what they bring. McKenna was a little bit more of an unknown, which can have a little bit more of an exciting element as compared to the rest, but it still was a huge risk.
I think you have to be very careful whenever you're sacking a manager that's winning trophies, because most seasons...
Is it a precedent night?
Yeah, it's a bad precedent, and also when you, as a fan, like, I know the Carabao Cup isn't the same as winning the league, it's not even close, but it is a bigger high single moment than Chelsea have had in the last few years, than Arsenal have had in the last few years. I would rather finish second and challenge for the Premier League than win the Carabao. I'm not saying we're better than Arsenal, but winning trophies and having days like we had on Saturday is irreplaceable as a fan. So if you're sacking a manager that's consistently doing that for you, you have to be very careful of who you bring in. Because like you said, you could easily get Poch, finish third 3 years in a row, maybe even get 80 points. Where's the best day of my life contender in that? That day on Saturday is one of the best days of my life. Like, it's not top 2 or 3, but it's in that conversation. You remember that time we beat fucking Norwich on the last day of the season to get 80 points? Is that the best day of my life? Not even close. Like, we have to think what it is to be a football fan is more than just, we got a couple more points in the league this season.
Or like Arsenal say, we were 5 points behind City last season, we were 2 points behind this season. And they're celebrating that.
They've had a couple of good years, but you don't
put that on a
explode with joy at finishing second last day of the season.
Don't give Arsenal any credit here.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, I think you have to be really careful, and there should be a standout candidate who is either someone like a Xabi Alonso, even when Mourinho was available. I know it didn't work out, but he's someone that had been a huge success everywhere he's been. Tuchel, the obvious weakness is that he falls out with people and leaves after 2 years. Pochettino, born failure. Like, De Zerbi, never done it at the top level and never really got close to winning trophies.
Is there one candidate who's finished in the top 4 and won a trophy?
Well, I guess Tuchel did it at PSG.
No, in the Premier League.
Premier League, no, they're in. Poch hasn't won a trophy whilst managing the Premier League. Tuchel finished top 4 the second season, but finished 6th and won the Champions League and then got sacked.
There are a few elements that
no, they haven't. De Zerbi's never finished top 4 or won a trophy.
Because it's not cut and dry. So there's a few elements.
Seems mad, doesn't it? There's no one from like the point I'm getting at is they're all a bit underwhelming. I feel like I'm having to convince myself over him. I'm having to convince myself De Zerbi is that guy. I'm having to convince myself Thomas Frank is that guy. I'm not feeling it or seeing it. And I'd be saying the same if Erik ten Hag had lost yesterday badly. On Saturday badly.
Yeah, because I had this opinion before the final of looking at the options and thinking.
I wouldn't be going, finally,
you know
Mauricio Pochettino's going to come here and save us.
And this comes from someone who everyone's seen. I've been very critical.
Do you know what it is, Ronnie, as well? So, I don't blame you for having those feelings and attitude towards Erik ten Hag, because I have watched a lot of Joss this season. We both have. Yeah. We have sat here, me and you, on a watch along, and all three of us, and it has been a hard watch. I'm not ignoring all that. The point is, though, I can see there's a manager who's, for me, earned the right to be given another season. And I also think the players are on board with him, and the other alternatives are just underwhelming. Like, you know, Tuchel, he's won a Champions League. I'm not going to ignore that because it's a fantastic achievement. But he's also finished third with Bayern Munich.
I just think Ten Hag would have made this a lot easier for himself, because as much as he was hampered and the teams were decimated with injuries, I would just wish he still, in more games, provided a bit more of that kind of compactness and rigidness that we saw on Saturday. I think if he got a few more better results and better performances and played to the strengths of the players that were available, which wasn't always that great, I think he would have made it definitely easier. But I think there's a few points that we are missing. And if you're Ten Hag, going forward, if you do end up staying, are you happy with the ownership though, and how your job has been touted in the media, the tough questions that he's having to be asked, he's not been given any assurances at all. The way he's almost been hung out to dry a little bit. So I don't know, even if Ten Hag was to stay, does he have a little bit of a gripe with the ownership? That's another thing that I'm thinking. And if you're Ineos, you've made it clear. Let's be clear. Even if Ten Hag does stay, Ineos quite clearly haven't thought that Ten Hag was the guy.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
No.
And it seems like for Ten Hag to stay, it's just because they're settling.
Do you think
I think that's not a great way for them to start their ownership. And it looks like that's why a lot of people are like, Ten Hag should stay.
Do you know what?
And I've kind of shifted.
Do you know what vibes it gives me if he stays?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you, but I think he could keep his job by getting results. Di Matteo under Abramovich. I feel like it could be a bit like that.
Yeah, he wanted to sack him.
He wanted to sack him. He won the Champions League and the FA Cup, so he couldn't because that would just be insane. So he kept him, and then as soon as it went south, he got rid of him, like 3 months later or whatever. Yeah. And I think it could be like that, but my feeling is that Erik ten Hag will do enough next season to keep his job. I think he will.
But the thing is,
I just feel like it's weird because Ineos have quite clearly made it obvious that they don't fully believe in him, and it's almost like something's going to change. And I just think it's a weird beginning to the whole Ineos tenure of the gaffer being someone that he didn't back because they didn't.
But it's also hard though, because if they'd have just come out and backed him blindly, and we'd have ended the season in 8th, got battered in the FA Cup final, then you sack him, or then you say no, we're sticking with him anyway, and that would also look bizarre.
No, I think you have a few weeks ago though. I think if they were definitive that he was going to stay, they would have said it like a couple of weeks before the season end. Do you know what I mean? I just feel like it does leave a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth if you're Ten Hag, the way that kind of Ineos have gone about it. Yeah. And from their business standpoint, for them to decide, as it seems like they have, that Ten Hag isn't someone that they fully backed and is their guy, to then go back in it and change their mind just because there isn't a better option, that could be the best case scenario for us as fans, or could be the best case scenario for United going forward. That remains to be seen. But it just seems a bit tetchy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll get into some of the options as well in just a minute. But before that, this podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. You know what they are, Jay? They are the below-the-waist grooming experts. They're the biggest in the world. Over 8 million men trust Manscaped.
And we've seen that rise, haven't we? Since we've been doing this, that has risen consistently, And there's a reason it's risen, because like you say, they lead the way. And we have seen the biggest advancement in below-the-waist grooming technology the world has ever seen, Because they have dared to dream. They've not only dared to dream, they've delivered on that dream. They have got the Performance Package 5.0 ultra. Yeah, we are talking ultra shit here.
Well, it's got the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, which is the next generation trimmer. Okay?
Yeah.
It's got interchangeable blade heads, which means you can do your standard trimming and your close shave stuff with the foil blade as well. And if you go over to manscaped.com, you can get 20% off and free shipping using the code DEVILS20.
Can I ask you something though, Joseph? What? Right, this is all well and good, yeah, with your Ultra 5.0, yeah, it's amazing, yeah, I get it, well done. Yeah. But I like certain things, yeah. I like the weed whacker. I like the crop preserver. I like the ball toner. I like the shed travel bag. I like the boxer briefs, yeah? What, you're getting rid of all them now because we're getting something different? I don't like that kind of change.
Silly little pudding. Right. You get all of that in the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. And not just that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You get the Shed Travel Bag Extra and you get the Performance Boxer Briefs as well that go alongside all of those things you just mentioned. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
And with our code, like I said, DEVILS20, you can get 20% off and free shipping. It's high tech for low places. Do you know what I mean, Jay? And it's going to replace whatever you've got now, whatever little device you're using, your mum's lawn scissors, you know, some sort of secateurs that you found in the shed. This is better than that. Again, use the link in the description.
I love this line, right? Seal the deal with Manscaped's liquid formulations.
Yeah.
Liquid formulations. Wasn't that the name of your band at high school?
That was our little move. Liquid formulations, me and Big John. Yeah, not him who does the Bosch. But make sure you use the code DEVILS20 for 20% off and free shipping. Thank you very much to Manscaped. And I can promise you've never seen a ball trimmer like it.
You haven't. DEVILS20. Thank you.
Big
thank you to them for sponsoring us.
Yes. So, just looking ahead a little bit, we've supposedly got this performance review, this season review. According to The Athletic, we saw this idea of a season review that's going to be conducted this week before we find out if Ten Hag is going to get sacked or not.
Yeah.
I've got a conspiracy theory for you.
God, love a conspiracy theory, mate.
And it's, Ronaldo is a conspiracy theory.
He wrote the book on conspiracy theories, this kid.
I'll tell you what the theory is, and I'll tell you why I think it. My theory is that is bullshit. And I'll tell you why I think it's bullshit. Because, first of all, they must have been conducting some kind of analysis up until yesterday, right? How? So let's say you've been watching Man United for 6 months. They bought the club or announced that they'd bought it on Christmas Eve. That's 5 months ago. Okay, they'd known they were trying to buy United for another 12 months before that. What do you learn from one extra game that you didn't know already? Obviously, there's some things you learn. It seems like the players are still playing for him. Bringing Martinez back and the injury crisis we've had seems to have made a big difference. You know, Rashford obviously still loves Manchester United. We've got Garnacho improved. We've learned a few things. But if you've got this body of work that has lasted months, getting reports, in at Carrington, in speaking to the manager, analysing this, that and the other, speaking to players, speaking to staff, how long does it take to add 90 minutes more of information to that report? I don't see how it can make that much difference.
So I kind of agree with you, right? And I do. I sort of agree. I just feel like if there is any game that could make a difference, like going up against Pep Guardiola in a final when Rodri's playing as well.
I don't think it makes a difference.
You don't? No. I think like that is one game where they might look at.
It should make some difference.
Because that game is like, hasn't Rodri not lost a game in 90 minutes in like 3 years or something?
71 games, I think it was.
71 games he's not lost in 90 minutes. I know he lost on penalties to Real Madrid. I don't know why that stopped being a thing, losing on penalties, by the way. But that, Pep in a final to do the double as well. I get your point. It doesn't make a difference. I just feel like if there is a game where you might go, actually,
yeah,
that is the ultimate game. That Pep in a final with his strongest team available to him.
And also, let's not forget, Pep Guardiola had won 21 of the 23 finals he'd been in until Saturday.
And one of them he lost, he gave away when he dropped Rodri for the Chelsea game. I think that was ridiculous. I'll die on that hill. Yeah. It was sabotage. I'm glad he did it, but still.
But how long does it take to add the City game into this sort of season review of theirs?
If you do the math, it just looks like Ineos probably did decide a little before this, quite before the City game, that they were going to sack Ten Hag, and then they've quite obviously been reaching out to managerial candidates, which feeds into that suggestion that they were going to sack Ten Hag.
Yeah.
Or that was probably the decision that they were leading towards, and then they probably just conducted interviews, looked at alternatives, and they're not quite sure on the obvious replacements. and that would be the reason why Ten Hag would stay.
And I think
I think that's more the decision rather than it swinging on the FA Cup final.
I do think that's valid as well, though, because people have this binary thing of, should the manager stay or not? Well, we finished 8th, and I can see why people have gone to the conclusion, no, he shouldn't stay. Because 8th is unacceptable. We all know that. So if you want him to go, I disagree, but I can get why you would come to that conclusion. But it can't just be then, okay, we finished 8th, that's not acceptable, manager sacked, right, who are we getting in? It cannot work like that. You have to have joined up thinking across everything. You have to have the next person in. You know, you can't just, this Coke tastes a bit weird, let me just bin it. Oh shit, I'm on a desert island, I've got nothing to drink. You have to sometimes go with the best option, even if it's not perfect. Like, I just think if there was an obvious candidate available, I think they would probably get rid of him. And they may well still get rid of him. But for me, when you factor in winning trophies year after year, when you factor in the injuries this season, when you factor in the options available, I don't see a manager that will do better things over the next 12 months or 2 years with Man United that's currently available than Ten Hag. It's possible, obviously, but I just
we don't know, innit? But
I don't see it.
I just feel like obviously alongside the injuries and him exacerbating, I think it was just sometimes it was probably a bit of his stubbornness. But I think a big issue in the whole Ineos thing of whether Ten Hag stayed or not is apparently don't Ineos want him to have a bit of a reduced amount of power in terms of what his job is. I think they wanted to go for someone that was just a head coach and that only. Whereas Ten Hag, I think, has quite a lot of power in terms of veto on transfers, and I think he has quite a lot of influence over the academy as well.
Clearly, it seems to with scouting as well, doesn't it? Because of who we've bought so far.
And I think Ineos want to reduce that, and it's about whether Ten Hag actually agrees to that as well. Yeah. Whether he will agree to that reduced role. But
I mean, he has to. Unless it's written in his contract that he gets to pick the transfers, he's under contract at Man United. Unless he can quit, obviously, but unless he quits, he does what they say, surely. Like, I'm obviously, taking someone's power away from them in any walk of life isn't easy, and people don't tend to like it. But if they say it's a new structure, it's a new system, this is your new role within that, or reduced role, I don't think he would kick up so much of a fuss that he had to leave. I don't know, maybe he would.
It's mad, isn't it? Because I don't know. So the trouble you've got right now, is the amount of misinformation that is out there regarding everything.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, the other day I heard that he'd turned down the Bayern Munich job to stay at United. I don't know if that's true or not. And when I say I heard it from my mate. It was a journalist wrote it. Yeah. Saying, basically he turned down the chance to talk to Bayern Munich about their job because he wants to stay at United. Is that true? If it's true, then why has he done that if he doesn't feel like his job is safe? That makes zero sense to me. Today we've seen it with all this speculation and there's articles out there, and we literally quoted someone's article and then they changed their article because they realised I've said something that I haven't got any evidence for. And you've got all this sort of stuff happening. You've got people, journalists, saying one thing and then saying a complete opposite thing the same day.
And then all the articles are very vague, or it's just an ambiguous one line within an article about another team.
All the big news that's come out since the cup final has about Ten Hag's future at Man United have been in articles that the headline isn't even about Man United.
It's like they're trying to bury it, innit? In the bottom, or there was one today, it was a Chelsea article. Like, you would never, right, have the biggest part of your news story, your news article, on your bottom line.
No.
That would be your lead. You wouldn't go, I'll tell you what, there's been a massive crash, Dodi Fayed has died, oh, by the way, Princess Diana died as well.
Yeah.
Like, that is not, do you know what I mean?
That's not how you structure news,
do you know what I mean? The big story, obviously, would be Diana.
For a reason.
Dying. Not a bodyguard got injured. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Diana's dead. Which is what some of these people have done. They've written an article going, Chelsea is blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, Erik Ten Hag's going to get sacked. What? Yeah. And then you go, oh, you're taking my words out. No, you're not. Your context was there. Yeah. And if it wasn't, why have you changed it? And we're seeing this from a lot of journalists now at the minute. And it's weird that some of these journalists, we know all the journalists that cover United, right? The prominent ones. We've had them all sat here. Yeah. We've had, I don't know, Jamie Jackson, Dave McDonnell, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker, Laurie Whitwell, James Ducker, everyone.
Rob Dawson.
Everyone who's in that press conference, right? Apart from people that write for The Sun, we have had here. Yeah? We have had them here in this studio and we've spoke to them, right? Yeah, I am seeing people I've literally never heard of breaking the biggest stories to do with Manchester United in recent years. Yeah. And it's like, well, how have they got it? Have they got sources that none of the guys we speak to have got?
Yeah.
Like, but do you know what I mean? It doesn't. And then you look at the article, and actually, they're kind of saying it and not saying that. They're kind of covering the back. They're going, well, he is going to get sacked. Although there is still a possibility that he might not.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a story.
Yeah, and it is true, because it is true.
I could have told you that.
Because obviously with this review thing that Ineos are doing, I think they're going to be looking at the 2 seasons, or last season in particular. They're going to take everything into account. It definitely won't be swinged on the FA Cup final, because what we do need to be cautious of doing as fans, though, is obviously getting caught up in the day that was the FA Cup final and kind of using that to kind of romanticise Ten Hag's tenure, when obviously, if you're looking at the broader picture, as unbelievable as that was, as me and Jay kind of mentioned earlier, there were a lot of worrying stuff that did happen throughout the season in terms of how we played. We got some terrible performances, some tactics that didn't quite work, as well as the injuries. So I think all of that criticism was valid, and that's mainly the reason why his job seems to be up in the air as much as it is. But I do want to kind of mention that, is like, I know as fans we can be quite emotional, but you got to be careful about using that FA Cup final to kind of romanticise the whole season in general and make it seem like it was something that it wasn't. Yeah.
One other option that I think is worth thinking about as well is, let's say they deem that the alternative to Ten Hag, none of them are quite right. Poch's got this sort of perceived lack of trophies. Tuchel falls out with everyone. De Zerbi, very, very intense kind of guy and has never proved it at the top level. And Thomas Frank as well, very similar kind of, not the same kind of manager to De Zerbi, but you could throw some of the same things at him. Maybe they say, none of these are quite there yet. McKenna even hasn't proved it enough. We're going to stick with Ten Hag. How do we make the best out of that situation? One thing that was rumoured just after Christmas, I think it was this idea that a potentially British, I think all the names were British, but a coach who is a little bit more friendly, a little bit more arm around the shoulder, a little bit more kind of McLaren kind of fills this role a little bit, but a sort of modern tactical manager who's a little bit more sort of gregarious and a bit less stubborn than Ten Hag is, to come in as an assistant to him, to try to kind of bridge that gap between him and the players if some people deem that to be crumbling slightly. Do you think that's a good idea? Bringing in not necessarily someone who's a manager elsewhere, but a new assistant or someone that can do that Steve McLaren role? Because that was something that was mentioned, wasn't it? Do you think they might think of doing that, like getting in a new coach to help Ten Hag out rather than sacking him?
Potentially, but he's got to be on board with that, hasn't he? He cannot have an assistant he don't want there,
right?
Or he's completely against. The club can't force him to have someone there and them to not get on or not work. You know better than I do, Ronnie. You've been in more dressing rooms than I'll ever be in. Like, does that work? Would that work, do you feel? If they said to him, look, we want you to stay, but we feel we can help you out, or it can be better if you have if Rennie Merlinstein, just to pull a name out there, the air, that I've got absolutely no reason to believe it will be him, came back in and was a bit of a buffer. Does that work?
That doesn't seem to be in Ten Hag's personality, though. Okay. He seems quite meticulous, quite likes the power, likes being very controlled of his environment. I think it can be quite probably offensive if you just say to him, I don't think you're quite competent on your own. We want to bring our own kind of coach in to help you. I think would he agree to that? I'm not sure, because he could just have completely different ideas. But so I don't reckon he would agree to that. But in his contract, he does have a lot of things that gives him a lot of power in terms of scouting, transfers, and the academy. And I think what's probably going to hurt him is the fact that he pushed so hard for Anthony and the price that it was, and that's failed miserably. So that's going to work against him in discussions with Ineos about whether he can still have any type of power that that his contract would include. So where we kind of stand now is Ineos or United are probably going to either move on from Ten Hag, or they're going to have to give him a new contract and pledge their kind of next few years to him, and they got to make sure that they believe in him. And I'm just thinking that Ineos haven't showed that they believed in him, and that's the thing for me. Because it would have to be a new contract and there would have to be some sort of change, and then obviously Ten Hag would have to agree to that as well. And I think obviously Wilcox has come in, and I think he's actually been that person that's apparently wanted to kind of give a little bit of input tactically of what he thinks that United should be playing like and what United should look like and the players that we should be going for. And I have seen some elements towards the end of the season of Ten Hag actually learning from some of the stubbornness that he had shown throughout the season that were working against us. And even against Arsenal, I thought that was a decent performance and decent setup. Yeah. And I saw slight improvements of him kind of finally making some tactical adjustments that we were calling out for. That's literally all I was saying, because people kind of want to put everything quite binary and black and white and say I was massively a Ten Hag outer. I was just criticise. I just call it as I see it, and I was criticising week in, week out what I was seeing. And when he does things brilliantly, like he did on the weekend and he did in a couple of games, I'll mention that as well. The same way that I will mention that I've never been all the way on that side, just because when I did look at the manager market, I wasn't really inspired by anyone that I did see.
Yeah. No, I think I do think people pretending that whoever's available to replace him isn't a huge thing. Like, if you're doing that, then you obviously, that's why you're not in a position to make this decision. Like, you cannot get rid of someone and then just go, right, who's about? Like, obviously you have to know that someone good is about. Just on, obviously, Ten Hag and Wilcox and the maybe slight changes of play. One thing that, I won't say it worries me, but I think was kind of drawn into focus a little bit again at the weekend, is that we all kind of want Ten Hag to play a certain way, want to keep more of the ball. Ten Hag was like 65-70% possession at Ajax and different things. Once again, I think we saw on Saturday that these players are best suited to counter-attacking football. I think Garnacho and Rashford in particular are much better at that. I think our midfield, as good as Amrabat was, I don't think he's suited to high possession, keeping the ball football. I know Onana and Martinez can help with that a little bit, and Luke Shaw's crucial to that as well. But do you think that, just in terms of squad and personnel, we can play maybe not quite elite, but a very good standard of counter-attacking football? But if this squad was asked to keep the ball for 65-70% possession next season, do you think they could even do that? Do you think we are still a couple of transfer windows away from being able to play that way anyway?
That's what makes it so difficult, because you do look at United's players and personnel, and you've got a lot of players that suit a certain way of playing in terms of counter-attacking and transitional football, and you've got some players that are capable of playing possession, kind of controlled football, the likes of Mainu, the likes of Amad Diallo, the likes of Luke Shaw, Martinez, and then you've got players that are not suited to playing that with the likes of Garnacho, who only knows how to play fast, and then you've got Rashford, even Højlund. So you've got a lot of mismatch of profiles, but that's what, when the earnest on the manager becomes, how do you figure out a way for it to actually mesh and result in some sort of kind of element of performance? And I think that's what was missing for large parts of the season, and then it obviously got worse when you had such a low ceiling of quality in the 11 because of our better players being out. Because we saw the difference that Martinez made when he came back, but I think Luke Shaw's another one that, as much as we sometimes can be critical of him not always fulfilling his potential, he still is, when he's playing at the top of his game, probably arguably the best left back in the world. I agree. He completely helps our build up.
We've got a few super chats. Alpha Omega says, couldn't agree more with Jay's take on Ten Hag. Very good. I agree with you as well. Dean B says, the Fergie first FA Cup and Ten Hag are so similar. Check it out. Well, we will be checking that out. We've got a little video coming on that potentially as well. Hubert Stustak says, FA Cup game is what football is all about. Let's enjoy the win and have a pint for the lads and a Diet Coke for Jay. Nice. Up the Paddock, up the RH. Cheers from New York City. Thank you very much, Hubert. Fergal McClements says, I want Ten Hag to stay, but that confidentiality thing around De Zerbi scares me that he's United bound. That is a bit of an odd thing, isn't it? That there was reports that someone had paid Brighton somewhere in the region of £4 million in compensation for De Zerbi to join them, but no one knows who it is.
That obviously isn't United, because United have been interviewing a bunch of different managers, so why'd they be doing that if they've already paid?
That's what I mean. I just don't. I almost feel like you can't trust anything.
I don't think De Zerbi's United bound at all.
You're not.
No.
Raf22 says, I was gutted for Solskjaer, played good football and didn't finish 8th, was backed less in every sense and took accountability. Can't say the same for Ten Hag. Outplayed by Burnley at Old Trafford and blames injuries. Shocking. But the difference is, when you go through the honour roll at in 10 years' time, Solskjaer's name isn't going to be on that list and Ten Hag's is. I think, I'm not saying I didn't love certain times under Solskjaer. Overall, it was probably the most fun I've had in recent years. But trophies do tend to give you a bit more time, don't they?
Do you feel like it is a complete waste of time to just give him another year?
Well, just on that, can I get to one super chat just to spark that? Graham Wild just says, keeping Ten Hag means he gets a new contract 100%. So that's almost like, can you give him one more year if you just think you're going to sack him anyway, or do you have to give him a new deal as well?
Can you say, okay, we've seen signs, those green shoots, like what you said, Ronnie, is it started finally to start to adapt, be a little bit more pragmatic, doing the things that we've wanted to see earlier in the season, perhaps. Do you say, okay, let's give him another year, and then in the summer go again if it's not worked out? One thing I will say, I don't feel like there should be a race for any of these managers. I don't feel like we have to act now in case we miss out on Pochettino or De Zerbi. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't feel like it's like, well, if we don't act now, we're going to look back and go, my God, we could have got Thomas Frank and we didn't. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to dismiss these guys because they're obviously talented managers who've had, a certain amount of relative success, but I don't feel like it's like we have to act now because certainly not in terms of the managers available anyway. No, because in a year's time, I dare say there'll be just as good managers, if not better ones, available than what we've got now.
Yeah.
What I will say about the managerial position at United is whoever it is, whether it's Ten Hag or someone else, they've got huge pressure on them next season, and I think that probably even more so if they do change. But I think Ten Hag, if he does stay, he's still got a lot of pressure on him. I know he's got credit in the bank in terms of the title he won, but because of the way the end of the season's gone and Ineos coming in, and if he does sign a new contract, is it going to be 2-3 years? And then if he has another 6 months to 9 months and we see poor performances again and we don't see any element of progression, and then you sack him then later on and then you still got this big payout and then you're just in the manager market again, it almost feels like there isn't no sure correct answer, and that's just the way it is. Like, hindsight in the end will be 2020, but as for now, we can just all speculate really, because that's all I'm seeing journalists doing. I
think to your point there, one thing that we should admit, regardless of what happens here, is this is a very difficult decision that Ineos have got on their hands. Yeah. They aren't walking into an easy, he's been very good, let's keep him, or a, he's been so bad, we have to sack him. Like, this is hard. There's no obvious right answer. I err on the side of keeping managers generally, and I think what we saw from Ten Hag last season and his career as a whole gives me confidence that he can make United better again. But he's not been so great that it's no question. And the managers that are available, none of them are so shit that I would hate them at United. But none of them, like, this is really difficult. Like, Ineos have got a really hard job on their hands, which, to be honest, I don't envy.
It feels like a lot of the gaffers that are linked to kind of, you almost feel like a lateral move.
Yeah.
Almost.
That's a great shout, that. So it's not anyone who's got a particularly amazing CV or has recently done anything that great. Like, they've got... Tuchel's got the best CV, but recently has been poor. The one who's recently done the best of the ones available, seeing as Mckenna signed a new deal. De Zerbi, but again, have Brighton been as good the second part of the season as they were in the first half? Frank has done well at Brentford, but they finished 16th, so it's not like... I know it's Brentford and you've got to give him some sort of credit for doing so well at a team that many thought would go down as soon as he came up, but it's still finishing 16th in the Premier League. And who else am I missing? I mean, who's the guy that was at Bologna? He went to Juve. Yeah, you were saying he would have been like, I would have got that more.
He's got to Juventus.
Because I thought, well, he's done something now.
He's probably done the most impressive job in Europe.
And I could have got that. Yeah. I could have got, okay, there's a manager who's done... No one thought he was going to do what he did. No. He's playing the kind of football that's got everyone talking. Yeah, I get it. But obviously he's gone to Juve, so that's not happening.
Also, if you're watching this, hit the subscribe button. You see there, we're nearly at 749,000. We want to get to 750 very, very soon. So if you're watching and you haven't hit subscribe, hit it now, because we can maybe even get to 750,000 while you're watching. But do hit that, 749 should I say. Derek Best, who's been a member for 41 months, says if they were to keep Ten Hag, should they give him an extension? We can't have another year of not knowing if he'll be here next season. I think that's what we just sort of spoke about.
That's what they don't. I don't think that any of us want to do that. And I will say, as much as it might be a decision that you'd agree with if that did happen, Ineos changing their minds on the back of a final or on the back of like fan backlash, I don't think that, even if it ends up being a decision you agree with, I don't think that's a great sign.
No, but we don't know. But the thing is, I think they've done just a good enough job of not letting us know what their decision is.
It's got to be a decision they believe in.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't. I don't think you can invest what they've invested to get just put the part ownership and to take control of the football side, to then have their decision swayed on like one game or what they're seeing fans think. Do you know what I mean?
I know you mentioned earlier about players have been consulted. Do you think the players can have any influence on this?
Yeah.
Do you think, like, 'cause there was that statement.
That will be some influence.
Do you think the players could say, look, you know, we believe in this guy and what he's doing. We just won a trophy for the second time. We've been waiting to win trophies for years. Now we've got 2 in 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, we know we're on board with him.
That matters. That definitely matters.
I mean, they might not be. They might be playing for him, but they might truly deep down think he's not all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they've had a lot of hard results to sort of stomach.
Ben Hodder says, I can't see why Ineos would get rid of Ten Hag. Pretty much all the fan base wants to keep him. Surely they understand the impact of injuries. I mean, they're going to factor it all in, aren't they? You would hope. Right, Ronaldo. Wally of the week. Come on. You've had a week to think about it. Who's been an absolute Wally this week?
I've never got a Wally prepared.
I know you haven't.
I love that. I love
you
the
like
fact
to Wally
you
on the fly, don't you?
Almost as like, what, really?
Yeah.
We've been doing this for 4 years. How do you expect me to come up with something on the hit?
It's ridiculous.
I just don't really go.
Do you want me to buy you an extra?
Yeah, I can buy me some time.
Because to be honest with you, Ronnie, I haven't thought about it either. But I'm just going to come up with it.
Oh.
Go on.
I'd say Gary Lineker and Shearer.
Good lad, good choice.
Nicely done.
As people know that I've been critical of Ten Hag and that, but I thought the interview, that was hard to watch, man.
I thought it was disgraceful.
I thought it was bad. That was really.
Do you know what I hate about it the most? Is it the way they did it, right?
Alan Shearer sounded snarky in the way he was like, if you played like this, we wouldn't criticise you.
I'm a bit annoyed that Newcastle their place in the Europa Conference or something. But I thought as well it was weird because when Ten Hag actually pushed back and when you build people up and then you knock them down and I think you need to slow it down a bit, they didn't seem to say anything. And then when he'd gone, then he was sort of took to Twitter to defend themselves and said, well. And I thought, well, why didn't you say that at the time? Yeah. A lot of people do that.
Cowardice.
It's just a bit distasteful, I think. It was.
I
felt sorry for Ten Hag in terms of what they had to deal with. But the thing is, that's not even fully the media's fault. People are going to blame the media. I know, but I'm criticising Ineos again, but I don't think Ineos have done him any favours. No. In terms of, I feel like Ineos has set the platform for the media to attack him with these questions for the past week or so, though. Yeah. In my opinion, especially when I know it's not necessarily their fault. Some of the leaks have come out, but it's just a difficult situation.
Yeah. Jay?
There's a few candidates, but do you know what? I'll just go with Kyle Walker, innit? I know it's a bit of a tap-in. I don't mind Kyle Walker. I know when he came in, everyone was saying he's a nice guy and that. But I don't think he had a particularly good game. And then he started giving it to Lisandro Martinez. Was like, all right, then come over to the touchline and we'll have it. And then did that thing of kicking off but not kicking off. Like, Martinez was literally like, I was stood right near him. He was going, come on, then we'll go over here and we'll have it now. And he was like, and just walks off. And then, but still acting like he was kicking off. And Garnacho was getting in his way. And Garnacho was like, barely reaches his hip. Like, come on. Just stop pretending to be this sort of faux hard man and get on with the game. That annoys me more than anything. You know you're not going to fight him. So stop pretending you are.
I think City generally were absolute wallies at the weekend. Like, to me, the main way they looked like they were trying to score was 25-yard shots, because they couldn't get through us, and just diving, trying to win penalties.
Some of them dives. Like, that Foden one was... Foden and Haaland were the two worst culprits.
Aren't you the best team in the world? Aren't you meant to be able to find a way to kind of get through a shit team sitting back? If we can change the camera at some point. Aren't you meant to be not smacking the ball from 25 yards? Isn't this the whole thing that Pep does? You find ways in behind, you find ways through. They did fuck all of that, and then we're acting like they should have been given fouls and penalties because we stood our ground. Like, their whole setup and demeanour, the whole game, I thought was just poor. Absolutely poor. And then, like you said, this whole, like, we're going to get scrappy now.
I hate that. Do you know what? The one thing I hate in football more than anything is this pretend fighting nonsense. Yeah. Like, when people get in someone's face and you know you're not going to do anything. You know, you're like, what are you actually trying to achieve? What is it?
I know. Right. I'm sorry to put something else has popped up on my phone.
Go on, you can have as many as you want.
I've got your latest notification now. There has now been another article.
Go on. Sorry, I thought you were going to give us
another
article.
Get that Wally of the week off. This could be good or bad. We don't know.
Ronnie's got an exclusive.
Ronaldo with the exclusive.
It's not an exclusive. It's another ambiguous, vague article of.
But we need one.
Erik Ten Hag's future remains in grave doubt.
Can we change the thumbnail?
You're joking.
Immediately.
Not grave doubt.
Do you know what I mean?
It could go either way.
That will be the aggregated way it's been written.
It remains in grave doubt.
Yes, and then when you go into the article...
You've read that right?
Yes, and then when you go in the article, it'll just say, it'll be probably an article about Brighton or something, or Chelsea, and right at the bottom it goes, and Ten Hag's, and
it's an article.
We aren't sure whether Ten Hag isn't going to be in the job next year, so his job is in doubt. So we get told nothing new.
It's an article from the Shropshire Times, and it's about Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
And at the bottom it says, "Oh, by the way, Erik Ten Hag, I've got the exclusive."
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's tiring. Do you know what? I'm going to change my Wally of the week and change it to all these journalists who are trying to pretend they know something when they don't. If you don't know, just say it. A lot of journalists are admitting they don't know. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. We spoke to him after the game and he said, I don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? It's nothing, no one's going to judge you on that. Stop pretending.
Yeah. Right, everyone. Thank you very much. We won the cup. Well done, Jay.
Well done, Ronnie, as well. Can we give Ronnie a round of applause, man, for the watch long? Because we all scarpered off to Wembley.
Well done, everyone.
Do you know what I mean?
We won another trophy. The FA Cup is in the bag. And
absolutely
Ronaldo
smashed it with the content from the day.
Smashed it, mate.
I was watching it back last night. It was absolutely brilliant.
Just do it for the love of the game, man.
No, you've done it a few times this season when me and him have been gallivanting around watching football. Yeah, that's true. You've stepped up and it's appreciated.
It is much easier when you're just chilling, but do you know what I mean? I do it for you.
Well done, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Hit subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Almost at 750,000 subscribers now.
Come on.
And hit like to the channel as well if you haven't already. We'll see you in a bit.